Hello and welcome to the video presentation for lab number 3 in the American Public University class ISSC422. To get started, we're going to open up the ISSA VM Server Farm RDP folder, and in there we'll find a saved remote desktop connection file, the target Windows 01 RDP file. We will double click that. And to log in here, we're going to use the password all in caps at first, is ISSC422, and then a capital S in the word security. And once connected, you are prompted to connect to server. You can leave the administrative password the default and click OK, and that will connect you to the FileZilla server, which is a requirement for this machine. Once you have the logged on message, you can close that window. And from here, we are going to double click the Active Directory Users and Computers icon, which is right here. Next, we will select the Add New Group icon, which is right here. This is the Create a New User. This one is for new groups, so we click on that. And we're going to call this group Shop Floor. And then we're going to say OK. And now you'll notice down here that the shop floor security group has been created. Now we're going to do the same process to create two other groups, one for manager, one for human resources. Click on users, new group, manager. Also making sure that our group scope is set to global and our group type is set to security. Those are default settings, so you can just use the defaults and leave those be. There's your manager security group, and then human resources. Okay, in the next step here, we're going to create a new user. So while we still have the user's container selected, we'll click on the icon to create a new user in current container. And we're going to call this user SF user with the last name of 01. And the login name, and you'll notice that the user login name for pre-Windows 2000 is the same as for later versions of Windows. Select Next, and our password will be the same password we use to connect to this system, using all caps ISSC422 and then a capital S in security. Confirm. Now here we want to uncheck that the user must change password at next logon. It's a useful feature when using Active Directory, but for this purposes, for the lab, we don't need that. And then click Next and Finish. Okay, now you will see the SF user listed in the users container along with the security groups that we created earlier. Next, we want to add this user to a group. What you do is you would select the user, right click, and click the Add to Group option. here we're going to type in the shop floor so we can add it to that. Hit check names. Once it's underlined, you know that it's been found and you spelled it correctly, and then click OK. And then it says you were successfully added to that group. Click OK. And the next step for us to do, that was for the shop floor. Now we're going to create users for the other security groups. Again, select your users container and the new user icon. Next we'll handle the manager account. Manager, last name is 01. Same thing as before, the manager 01. Click next. We're going to use the same password so that we don't confuse ourselves. Capital ISSC422 capital security. And make sure that we uncheck the user must change password at next logon. Next, finish. And then create our other account. This is going to be the HR user, following the same naming convention. And same password. Uncheck password change. Next, finish. Now we have to configure these groups, or these users rather, into their respective groups. So I'm going to start with the manager account, and I will right click, add to group. And I'm going to add this user to the shop floor group. Say OK once it's underlined. And this user also gets added to the manager group. Okay. Next we set up our HR user. Right click, add to group. And he gets added to the human resources group according to the lab. Say OK. Successfully completed. And that completes the adding of the users and security groups. So at this point the lab asks you to create screen captures of the Active Directory users and computers screen to prove that you have completed that portion, and to paste that into a Word document as a deliverable for the lab. Now we can put our hard work to use. So we are done with Active Directory users and computers, so we close that window. And next we're going to open up my computer with a double click, and then we will double click on the C drive. And from here we're going to create a new folder. So we go to File, New, Folder, and we're going to call this folder ERP Documents. Hit Enter to save it. And now we can edit the properties of that folder by right-clicking on it and selecting the Sharing and Security option. This brings you into the ERP Documents properties under the Sharing tab. So we need to get to the Security tab, so we click on that, and then under the Advanced button we are going to uncheck the Allow Inheritable Permissions from the parent to propagate to this object and all child objects. What this does is it makes it so that the security properties of the C drive itself do not apply to this folder, so that we can go in and we can select our own properties. So from here you click the Remove button, and that will remove any permissions that are preset. And next thing we need to do, and this is not actually covered in the master version of the lab, but it's something that is important and needs to be done. We need to double click the administrator's account, and where it says apply onto this folder only, we want to make it, using the drop down, we're going to change it to this folder, subfolder, and files. And then we're going to click OK, and then OK again, and it will close that. And the next step is to actually add the security groups that we created earlier. So we'll click the Add button, and from here we're going to type Shop Floor, Manager, and Human Resources. So this is where they show how you can add 3 groups at once without doing it separately. So we type in our 3 group names, and we separate them with a semicolon. Click OK, and then because manager is listed twice, one for the group name and one for the first name of the user, you make sure that you click the group as identified by the double head there. Say OK, and then you need to verify that you have all 3 groups listed, which we have here. And once you verify that all 3 are there, just click OK. Next, we're going to double click the ERP Documents folder, and in here we will create 3 subfolders so that we can use the security groups that we created earlier. The first folder we're going to create is the HR Files folder. We do that by clicking on File, New, Folder. We'll call this HR Files. We need to do the same for our other groups. We'll create a folder for Shop Floor Files, and one for our Manager group called MGR Files. And the first folder we will change is the HR Files folder. So we're going to right click and go to the Sharing and Security as we did before. Select the Security tab. Next we have to verify that we have all 4 groups necessary to continue. We should have the Administrators group, Human Resources, Manager, and the Shop Floor group as well. Now we're going to click on the Human Resources Security group, and we're going to click the Modify checkbox in the Permissions section. Now this is the Permissions section down here. Under Modify, we're going to fill in that checkbox under the Allow column. And for this folder, we're also going to give rights to managers to the HR files folder. So we're going to select the manager group and modify for that one as well. And say OK. And then we'll continue to set up our group permissions for the other folders. Under the shop floor files folder, if we right click, sharing and security, and then our security tab. For shop floor, you click the shop floor group and check modify under the allow column. Say OK. And for manager files folder, we'll set up the same security settings for the manager group. Under the modify row, the allow column, and then say OK. And with that done, now we need to modify our permissions for the users that we created on this target Windows 01 server. So we're done in the ERP documents folder for now, so we can close the Explorer window. And we're going to click on Start, Run in order to open up the group policy editor. And that is gpedit.msc. And that brings up the group policy editor. Now we need to find the user rights assignment folder. And to locate that, we click on under the computer configuration, the Windows settings folder. If we open up that, we expand that a little bit. And then under security settings and local policies, you will find the user rights assignment folder. Select that, and we can find the policy called Allow Logon through Terminal Services, which is right here. Double click. Now we want to add the users that we created to this group so that we can actually log into this server using those accounts. So you click the Add User or Group, and at this point we can simply type in the domain users check name. Once it's underlined, say OK. What this is doing is it's adding any user who's in the domain users group to this group. And this is one of the advantages to Microsoft's group policy, in that you can layer these groups into other groups, and it makes things a lot easier to manage. So we'll say OK, and now domain users are allowed to log into terminal services. Say OK to close that window. And now we are done with the group policy editor at this point. So you can hit the X to close that window. And next we need to open the Active Directory Users and Computers icon again. And we click on the built-in container, and in there we will find the remote desktop users on the right hand side. We open this window up a little bit. If we double click remote desktop users, we will be able to add our accounts under the members tab. So we click the add button, and then again here we can type in the domain users group and say OK. And what that will do is that says that any domain user on this server has the right to use remote desktop, which is necessary for this lab. And we'll say OK. And then we are done with Active Directory users and computers, so we can close that window. And now test our work to make sure that we did everything properly. Click on Start, log off. And that will close our remote desktop session. And now we're going to reopen that session. And instead of logging in under Administrator, we are going to log in using one of the accounts that we set up earlier. Let's start with the shop floor user. 1, and our password ISSC422 security should let us log in. Now again, we have to say OK to connect to the FileZilla server. Once logged in appears, we can close that window. And here, we're going to click on Start All Programs, Accessories, and Notepad. Now the purpose for the Notepad is to just test our permissions to see if we set our permissions on our folders correctly. You don't actually have to type any text here, but what we're going to do is click on File, Save As, and we're going to call the file sfuser01.txt. What we'll do is go into My Computer, under the C drive, ERP Documents. We're going to attempt to save that file into the SF Files folder. And now we can just hit Save, and we've done that successfully. Next, we're going to attempt to save this to the other folders that we created, and that's going to test the rest of our security settings. So if I do File, Save As again, and then I attempt to save this to the HR Files folder. We'll go up a level, try to put it into the HR Files folder, and when we hit Save, you'll notice we get an error message saying that we do not have permissions, which is correct. We never set up the permissions for the sfuser01 into the HR Files folder. So that's correct. And now at this point you can take a screen capture of this and paste that into a document and save that document into the SF Files folder as sfuser01_error.txt. And the next thing we'll do is we're going to say no to this message because we would not like to save this to the My Documents folder. And this test is complete, so we will close Notepad. And now we're going to do Start Log Off so that we can log in using our other accounts and test the permissions on those as well. So we're going to go back into our Target Windows 01 RDP Remote Desktop. And we're going to log in this time under the HR User 01 using the same password, ISSC422 capital security. Again, connect to server, say OK. Once logged on appears, you can close FileZilla server. And once again, we're going to go to Start Programs, Accessories, and we're going to click on Notepad. And we're going to attempt to save this to the HR Files folder. File, Save As. And we will call this one HR User01.txt. put this under the C, ERP documents. So we're going to attempt to put this into the HR files folder. And save. And that was successful. So our permissions are correct. And next we're going to attempt to put that into the manager files. And let's see how that works. So we'll do File, Save As. We'll go up one level to find the manager files folder. And then attempt to save it. And again, you get an error message because we never set up the permissions for the HR user 01 into the manager group. So that is also correct. And here you want to take another screenshot and use that as a deliverable for the instructor. Okay, we'll say no to that and cancel. And then let's attempt to save this to the SF file folders as well. Go up a level again, SF files, save. Once again, we get the error message as expected. So we click no and then cancel. And we have successfully tested the HS user 01 account. So we'll close Notepad. We'll log out one last time. Go back into Remote Desktop. And for the last time, we're going to log in under the Manager account. And of course the same password, ISSC422 Security. And again, OK for connect to server, close FileZilla server. We'll click on Start, Programs, Accessories, Notepad, and we'll follow the same procedure. We'll do File, Save As. For this one, we're going to call this manager01.txt, and we'll save it under the C drive, ERP documents, manager files folder, and that was successful. So our permissions led us into the manager files folder as expected. Next, we'll attempt to save this to the other folders. We'll do Save As. Let's do the HR files folder next. And we'll hit Save. And now that was successful because we applied the Human Resources group as well to the Manager 01 account. So those rights are successful for both the Manager Files folder and the HR Files folder. And then lastly, we will attempt to save this file to the SF Files folder. File, Save As. We'll go up a level to SF Files and save. Now that was successful because earlier in the lab we had granted access to the shop floor security group for the Manager 01 user account. And what this does for us is the Manager 01 account now has rights to all three folders. And the reason for that is the Manager security group, which Manager 01 is a part of, has rights to the Manager Files folder and the HR Files folder. Now the shop floor security group has access to the shop floor files folder, and that combination gives us our access to all three folders for the Manager 01 account. So at this point you can take screenshots of the three folders with all the text files saved in them and send those off to your instructor as deliverables. So at this point we'll just close Notepad and log off the remote desktop system. And lastly, we'll close the Explorer window, and the lab is complete. Thank you for watching.